Ukraine as a proxy war, as a war, especially a war between great powers. What does it expose about, especially the U.S. and the West's military crisis? Because it seems like the peace talks are kind of reflecting what the reality is on the war front.
Well, as Scott Horton's book, Provoked, which is back over my shoulder, lays out, this war was provoked with Ukraine and Russia. And you have to say, why did they do it? And it was very simple. They feared the union, the alliance of Russia and China together, and felt that by inflicting a military defeat on Russia, that it would compel Russia to come to the West and become basically subservient to the West. And then with us and Russia, we could take on and destroy China. Now that is actually, that's what this A. West Mitchell wrote. The paper was published in August of 2021 in the National Interest. People can go read it for themselves if they think I'm fabricating this. But that was the strategy. Now this was not just A. West Mitchell's musings. This was officially submitted to the government as Donald Trump's final months in office, and it was there for Joe Biden and his team. What they have created through the sanctions imposed on Russia as in the aftermath of the start of the special military operation is a dramatic acceleration of the institutional growth of BRICS. It has brought China and Russia together in this relationship that the West always feared. And now it has become a reality. And so this defeat that that the West is going to have to eat in Ukraine will mean not only did the strategy fail, but it exposed the limitations and weakness of NATO, both as a military and is not a military industrial power. It's actually powerless. It doesn't have the military, the industrial base to sustain a modern war. It doesn't have the kind of weapon systems that are effective in defeating and overcoming those employed by Russia. Just the opposite. Russia, in fact, has demonstrated weapon systems that the West does not have, including hypersonic missiles, and more importantly, the Oresnik, this intermediate range ballistic missile, which now can target all of Europe. And there's not a single air defense system that even on the drawing board that are capable of taking it down. And then you get to the issue of China. And what is alarming for me is I'm listening to Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent and others in the Trump team and Trump himself. They really, truly believe that they're hurting China on this more than the United States is going to be hurting. Mm-hmm. I think that's crazy, because if China's political system is such that even if they're suffering economic chaos and economic loss, their people will put up with it a lot better than people in the United States. We can't take casualties. We can't take suffering. We don't have the stomach or backbone for it. So this kind of foreign policy blindness that this entire war with Ukraine started really as it was provoke Russia, create the war, weaken China. That policy has blown up in their face.
I really think that we are confronting the change in the world, the move towards a multinodal world that is shifting power from the West back to the East, where it started 5,000 years ago, with China being the magnet for that. And I think the strategy that Larry just described and other offshoots thereof are futile attempts to arrest that momentum. What we should be doing is accommodating that momentum, working in comity, cooperation, and collaboration with other powers in the world that have the same interests we do in surviving and meeting these challenges we have. predominant amongst which are nuclear weapons, arms race out of control, and the climate crisis.
Let us talk now. There's a great question from a Patreon supporter, actually. So for those of you who want to support the show, you go to the video description, subscribe on Patreon, from Kevin. And I think this gets into what you were just referencing with regards to this new world emerging. He asks, do you think Russia is deliberately dragging out the special military operation so that it can drain NATO of its military weapons and munitions stockpile, making a wider war against Iran, China, and Russia itself more difficult to prosecute?
That's a good question. And were I strictly thinking from a military professional's point of view, I would attribute to Moscow a lot of strategic thought and a lot of conclusions that would run something like this. I can't trust the empire. I can't trust them. They've proven to me again and again and again, with regard to Ukraine from at least 2002 forward, with increasing duplicity, that I can't trust them. So I have to guard against that, because anytime they still have a lot of residual power, including 6,000 nuclear warheads. So I have to guard against that. I have to guard against it every minute of every day, while I try to adapt myself to these new relationships that I'm forging and this new world that is rapidly developing, that maybe I only understand in some incoherent ways right now. But I do understand that there's a massive change taking place in the world, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of it. The empire is on the wrong side of it, and a lot of Europe is on the wrong side of it. And so I've got to watch them very, very closely. And if I'm really smart and I'm like typical czars, I'm going to try to attrit them in any way that I possibly can that isn't dangerous for me in the process. And so, yes, the answer to your question is there might be some of that going on.
It seems to be what has actually happened here. The Trump administration talks all the time. Pete Hegseth, his initial directive to Europe, I mean, it's all about reorienting the United States toward the Pacific. But what we're seeing is that Russia's in no rush to settle Ukraine in large part until it gets what it feels is a fair deal. So,
yeah. And there's another aspect to this too that it sort of haunts me when I think about it, because I know I'm not going to be here to see it come to fruition. And that is that we really are on a track probably more dangerous than any of the tracks we were on during the Cold War, to include the Berlin crisis in 1961 and the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, to use nuclear weapons. India and Pakistan being a case in point right now. I'm looking at that very closely, because in 2002, we found out they were very, very close to having a nuclear exchange. And I'm hearing some of the same language come out of Delhi and Islamabad right now. So I think that there is one element to this that's very unique to all the previous historical illusions we could make for the past 5,000 years. And that is that we have the technological means to destroy the human race. And I don't just mean we, the empire. Russia has it. Other countries have enough to start it. That's a difference that has never existed in human history. And it's extremely dangerous.
You know, Colonel Wilkerson, I'd like you to elaborate too on, because we talked about Russia, we talked about this burgeoning alliance between or relationship, this deepening partnership with Russia, China, Iran. But it seems like right now, the relationship that the United States is prioritizing the most is, of course, Israel's. Given that you just said that there's this huge danger of nuclear war, there's talks about, of course, preventing Iran from being able to build a nuclear weapon, which it has said many times it doesn't even have an interest in doing unless attacked. Israel has nuclear weapons, and there is, of course, a raging regional war. What do you see as the kind of end game here? Because we're looking at what is 16, 17 months of genocidal war, of displacement of the Palestinian people in Gaza, and the regional situation is still very much on fire.
Yeah, you put your finger on the immediate tactical, operational, if you will, situation that could derail everything. I go back to that editorial in Haaretz. Trump, Netanyahu, and the death throes of the American and Zionist dreams. Well, you might as well put those two dreams together right now. And we've forged them in union. And we are tied to that beast out there in the eastern end of the Mediterranean in ways that we have never been tied before. And right now, they're destroying themselves. Haaretz has also had people who are very, very qualified to make the statements that they're making, from Shin Bet and from the IDF and from other elements of the security and political complex in Israel, saying in the last 48 hours, Jews are going to kill Jews in the streets. We're going to have a civil war. The question there becomes, will Netanyahu use an attack on Iran unilaterally launched, doesn't care whether the U.S. comes along or not, just to save his own rear end, just to save his place in the history of Israel, if you will? Will it be that kind of Solomon-like action, pull the temple down around his heads? And what will we do were that to occur? Will we be in for a penny, in for a pound because it's Netanyahu and it's Israel? Or will we stand back and let him destroy himself completely? I don't know, but you're right. That has all the ingredients for derailing everything that people might want to do that's positive and that might lead to a better world. That has a tendency, that has the capability to derail everything.
Yeah, talk about, how is Israel in particular destroying itself? Because, and you can throw in the United States' empire here too, but given all that has transpired since, especially the end of the so-called ceasefire that began Trump's administration, Israel is moving into Syria. Israel is threatening Iran. Israel is still violating all of the so-called ceasefire that was brokered around Lebanon. Still dropping bombs. Of course, has a big role in what's going on in Yemen and the U.S.'s war there. So many people observe that no, Israel is not destroying itself. Israel is in the driver's seat. What do you say to these people? Because I view it differently, but your expertise, you've been in the chair, you've done a lot around this region and the U.S.'s role there. What do you make of people who say that Israel's actually in the driver's seat? It's not being destroyed.
I don't think you're in the driver's seat when your casualty rate is so high, your WIA rate is even skyrocketing, and your PTSD rate is climbing alarmingly, over 8,000 now, I'm told. And you're looking at reservists right now who are saying, as the prospect of a third and even a fourth call-up for some of them transpires in front of their faces, some of them have already gotten the call-up, I'm not coming, I'm not going. And you're seeing a shift of veterans into the more critical areas of Gaza just because of this, because the reservists have failed to show up. They're not going to show up. They're not going to report for duty. Maybe they'll be able to get enough of them to shore up Lebanon and maybe shore up Syria. But Gaza is going to have to be all professionals. It's going to have to be all people who signed to do the deal. That's a tragedy for the IDF. The IDF is fracturing. It's falling apart. So I don't see any of the fiber of Israel that's intact right now in the way it was prior to October the 7th, no matter how reprehensible even that might have been in terms of their treatment of the Palestinians. This October 7th to the present has disassembled much of the fabric of Israel. And it's just waiting to start burning.
It seems like both the United States and Israel are caught in their own versions of, and the United States, of course, a big part of what's going on in the region vis-a-vis Israel. Forever wars. And it seems like that's all that the U.S. as an empire has left at its disposal. It's not really offering much in these negotiations on all sides, and all these negotiations that are taking place in talks. And what we see is the United States continuing on in this forever war path. In Israel, of course, now is it has always been against the Palestinians, but regionally has deepened this forever war mantra and dynamic.
Yes, and I'm hearing more and more from people around Mohammed bin Salman, Mohammed bin Zayed, and other leaders, Sisi, for example, even Aoun in Lebanon. I'm hearing more and more that people are despairing despairing of the future of their own country and despairing of the future with an Israel that is unleashed as it is right now, with no checks and balances whatsoever, and a superpower, America, the empire, who's behind it. People are going to start looking for options. They're going to be looking for places to hide, at least, or places to go. BRICS is a perfect example of that. And the momentum of BRICS right now is just accelerating every day. I don't think that, if I'm 80 right now, if I live to be 85, I may see the U.S. currency become the non-transactional, the non-reserve currency of the world. I may see something else replace it, first on a regional basis, maybe commodity basis. But I think eventually we're going to see the U.S. dollar evaporate as the world's base currency. And that is a real blow to us. It will increase our debt overnight by astronomical amounts because we'll no longer be able to manipulate it. And it's going to cause us to probably retrench to the point where Trump's idea of Fortress America will seem calm and peaceful compared to what we do. We will retrench inside our own borders into hell with the rest of the world while we try to nurse our wounds, lick our wounds, and correct the things that have put us there. But it won't be correctable.
As you stated before, I mean, the trajectory of the world, it seems, Colonel Wilkerson, is that there's just a deep amount of desperation. And you mentioned the nuclear question. Some people argue with me, oh, well, there's still a long way to go there. But I actually see when it comes to the rise of Russia, China, and even Iran, because the end games of any kind of conflict militarily with these three rising powers is just catastrophic and almost impossible to imagine militarily, that this is why nuclear war is closer than ever. That's how I view it now. I'm curious on your assessment.
No, you're right. And you would think that just the sobering fact that you just articulated would cause people to pause, back up, and re-strategize and do things differently. You would think. But instead, we are doing what every empire that I'm cognizant of in human history has done toward its end, and that is jump in for more, reinforce failure, deepen failure, make more profound failure until you collapse. I'm sorry, but that's pretty much the way every great empire in human history has gone out. And as I said before, we have a unique way to go out and a unique way to try and prevent that inevitability from happening conventionally, and that is to use nuclear weapons. That's never occurred before. We had in the Muslim Empire, in the Mughal Empire, in the Mongol Empire, in the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine, you name the empire, they had prophets who predicted the end of the world. The various gods that they served and so forth predicted the end of the world, but it never came about. We now actually have the capacity to end the world, or at least end the human race on that world.
And that capacity, is exactly, it's buttressed, it's supported by that the seemingly reality that there's no other options. Either you get into an absolutely devastating military campaign, which if Ukraine is a lesson, even what's happening in West Asia, if it's all a lesson, the lesson is that it just doesn't end well. No matter how many bombs, how it doesn't end well, simply because even the U.S. and the West, they're militarily depleted in many ways. So what other option is there? And that I think is the big danger that we are confronting here. Any final thoughts before we head out of here, Colonel Wilkerson?
No, I agree with you. And I think the scariest thing I heard today was that Modi has turned over all decision-making to his military. I hope that's not right. I hope he's trying to scare Islamabad. But that would be the dumbest possible thing for Modi to do. It's over to the military. If the military wants to start something, go ahead.